Welcome to my video briefing on NISAs. Yes, NISAs, not ISAs. On the 1st of July 2014, the ISA died and was replaced by the NISA. But all a NISA is, it stands for New ISA. It's not that different. You can just put some more in and a few small technical rules did change. Now I'm focusing here primarily on cash NISAs, savings accounts. And you know, people get very confused about these. They worry about putting their money in because they don't want to lock their cash away or they don't want to take a risk with it. But forget all that. If I could do one thing, I would hypnotise a nation. Look into my eyes, don't look around my eyes, just look into my eyes and you're under. Every time you see or hear the word cash NISA, you're just going to think, it's a savings account you don't pay tax on. That's all it is. It's a savings account you don't pay tax on. So, just like there are savings accounts which you can put your money in and take them out the next day, easy access, there are easy access cash NISAs. Just like there are fixed rate savings accounts that you can put your money in, lock it away to get a guaranteed rate of interest, there are fixed rate cash NISAs. Just like there are regular savings accounts where you get a high rate for putting money aside each month, yeah, you guessed it, there are regular saving cash NISAs. So, what does this you don't pay tax on it bit mean? Well, it's actually very easy. There isn't any income tax that's generally paid on the fact that you save, it's only paid on the interest. So for a basic rate taxpayer earning £100 interest, chance to be a fine thing, but let's pretend anyway, earning £100 interest in normal savings, you would receive £80 after tax. A higher rate taxpayer, you'd receive £60 after tax. A top rate taxpayer, you'd receive £55 after tax. Put that money in a NISA, and you earn 100 quid. In other words, if the interest rate is the same, you earn more, you get more in your pocket by putting your cash in a NISA than you do a regular savings account. Which is why, if you have the opportunity and you haven't used your NISA, your money is NISA in a NISA. That was far better when it was ISAs, by the way. Your money is NISA in a NISA worked, but your money is NISA in a NISA doesn't. But don't worry about that. Let's not worry about my rhymes. Now what I've got here is lots of questions that you have been trying to ask me, and I'm going to see if I can bash them through now. With the new rise, what happens? How much money can I put in a NISA? It's dead easy now. You can put £15,000 into a NISA. You can put all £15,000 into cash, or all £15,000 into stocks and shares, or a combination of the two. £7,000 in a cash NISA, £8,000 in a stocks and shares NISA. If you've already opened a cash ISA, in the time between when NISAs were launched and the start of the tax year, so that's the 6th of April 2014 to the 1st of July 2014, if you opened a cash ISA then, you are allowed to top it up to £15,000 because the old limit on cash NISAs was £5,940. So you can top it up providing your ISA provider allows you to do so. Next question. I've got several ISAs from previous years. Can I put them all into one? Well, you now have several NISAs because all your old ISAs have changed. Yeah, there's no problem in consolidating cash NISAs. None at all. In fact, it's quite a good idea. If you think about it, if you've got them all in one place, then when you want to transfer them the next year to up the rate, as you generally do have to if you get a variable rate cash NISA, because the rate could drop, then having them all in one place makes it bureaucratically much easier to do so. So as long as you're improving the rate, consolidating them in one place, as well as with this year's new money if you can, is not a bad idea at all. How many cash NISAs can I have? Ooh, now, it depends why you're asking me that question. If you're asking me in straightforward terms, I would answer, you can have one cash NISA for this tax year, and you can have cash NISAs for previous years that you could consolidate. If you were trying to catch me out, then I would say you can have one cash NISA for this year, although you could transfer it the week after you open it to another provider, which closes the first one down, opens up the next one, and you could do that ad nauseum. Or to be really technical, for a past year's cash NISA, so in other words, one you opened before the 6th of April 2014, with those, you are allowed to transfer them and split them into different cash NISAs and put money in stocks and shares if you wanted. So one previous year's cash NISA could be split into lots of different ones. So the answer is loads. You could have loads, but the real point I think you're making is, how many can I open with this year's money? One. Next question. Rates are so low, is it even worth saving in a NISA? Yes. Well, let's be very simple. If you're going to earn 50 quid interest In a normal savings account, because it's been taxed, you're probably going to earn 60 quid at the same rate in a NISA. And NISA rates tend to be higher than normal savings rates anyway, so you may as well put your money in there. Now, I'm not saying it's a wonderful rate. It may in certain circumstances be less than inflation. But if you're going to save, you have to do all you can to maximise the rate to the top. The only things out there that are really beating cash NISAs at the moment are some of the bank accounts that pay loss-leading amounts on small bits of saving, up to 5%. You can go and read my guide on that that's on the website. It's called the 5% Savings Loophole Guide on how to manipulate that. And in some ways, certainly in the short term, that will beat a cash NISA. But remember, the point about ISAs and NISAs, oh, it's very difficult this. I'm recording this just so you know, on the day before cash ISAs turn into NISAs, so I'm getting a bit confused between my ISAs and my NISAs. But they're all NISAs now as when you're watching this. The thing to remember about them is once you put your money in, it's not just tax-free now, it stays tax-free year after year after year after year. As long as you haven't taken the money out, it's sitting in there and all your savings are tax-free, which means over the years, certainly now at £15,000 a year being the limit, you could have a lot of money saved away. So in 3 years' time, if you had only started this year, you'd have 45 grand in tax-free savings. It's a big amount. And that's the long-term game of shoving your money into a NISA now and maximising the allowance. Should I offset my mortgage instead of putting a cash into a NISA? Well, at the time of doing this, the very best paying cash NISA pays 2.3% roughly. Slightly bit more if you fix it. The answer is this: if the after-tax rate of your mortgage, let me do that again. If your mortgage rate is higher than the after-tax rate of your savings, then you are better off paying off the mortgage than you are putting money in the savings account, because it earns you more to pay off the mortgage. You've got an offset mortgage, so there won't be any penalties for doing so, and as it's an offset mortgage, you would be able to access the cash if you needed it as an emergency fund. So it's really a question of rates. If the mortgage rate's higher than the cash NISA rate, because after tax that's the gross rate anyway, then yeah, pay off the mortgage. Can I open a joint NISA with my partner? No. Every individual gets a NISA allowance, not as a couple. So you would open a NISA, they would open a NISA, you could open two in the same institution, put your money in, they could be sitting next to each other, but they won't technically be joint. A relative has passed away, sorry to hear that, and left cash in a NISA, what can I do? Well, unfortunately, when someone passes away, it no longer is an ISA, a tax-free status, or is for a living person, so that money will transform into a normal tax savings account that belongs to the estate. When it's then moved on to somebody, you would have to use your own cash NISA allowance to use it. I'm a non-taxpayer, should I bother with a NISA when it makes no difference? Two answers to this. First of all, you're a non-taxpayer now. Will you be a taxpayer in the future? If you will, putting money in a cash ISA now could have a benefit of saving you tax in the future because it stays tax-free year after year. But also, NISA rates tend to be higher than straight savings rates. So even though you wouldn't pay tax on it, if you can earn 2.3% in an ISA and only 2% in an equivalent savings account, you may as well put your money in the NISA. But if you're never ever going to pay tax, just do it purely based on which is the higher rate, the higher gross rate, the pre-tax rate, that is. Can I set up a monthly standing order into my NISA? Yes, you can, no problem. And in fact, there are special regular savings cash NISAs that do it for you and can give you a very high rate. So it's worth looking at. The only thing to be careful of is when the tax year changes, so on the 6th of April, or the 5th of April to the 6th of April, that midnight point. If you've still got a standing order set up, then you're automatically subscribed to the next year's cash NISA, which you might not want to do, which would mean you would have to transfer it to move. So just think about it just before we get to the year-end point. If I haven't had the full allowance in my NISA for the full year, will I get the full interest? Look, you get interest on the amount of money you have for every day it sits in an account. So if you have had £500 in the account for 50 days, and the interest is 1%, well, you will get 1% divided, it's a seventh of a year, so you'll get a seventh of 1% on £500. It's as simple as that. It depends on how long you've had the money in and how much money you've got. If I take money out of my NISA, do I then pay tax on it at the usual rate? Well, yes, if you put it in another savings account. No, if you spend it, because it's disappeared. It's not like they suddenly back tax you for all the time you had it in a NISA. As long as it's in the NISA, it's tax-free. Once you take it out, you don't pay tax for taking it out, but then if you spend it, well, there's no tax on spending, there's VAT, but you know what I mean. If you chose to save it so it was no longer in a NISA and is in a normal savings account, you'd pay tax on it like it is in a normal savings account. Just to explain quickly, because I noticed that was the last question, the putting money in, taking money out rules. You are allowed to put £15,000 in a NISA. Whether you take it out is irrelevant, so let me give you a scenario. You put £10,000 in, how much more can you put in the rest of that tax year? Well done, £5,000. Okay, you didn't really answer, but I'm talking to myself, so I have to make it feel that way. Now, you withdraw 5,000 of that 10 grand, so you've got only £5,000 in, and the limit's £15,000. How much more can you put in? Some of you saying £10,000, some of you saying £5,000. Those of you saying £5,000 are correct, because it doesn't matter that you took the money out. You put £10,000 in, and it's only the money you put in that counts. You've got £5,000 left. The fact that you then withdrew £5,000 is irrelevant. You've still only got £5,000 left because it's the money you put in that counts. I do hope that has managed to get you through all of it and answered your questions, given you an introduction. Of course, for the latest deals and best buys and full information, go to moneysavingexpert.com/cash NISAs.